Hello, everybody. Welcome back to my channel where stories and other random things take center stage and imagination is prized above all. Welcome to today's video and happy Saturday. I hope you guys are having a fantastic morning and will have a wonderful rest of your day. I'm super excited for this video because we will be reviewing The War of Two Queens by Jennifer L. Armentrout. Now, this is one of the books I've mainly been waiting for this year, and it did not disappoint. I had a lot of fun reading this. I loved it. I loved it so much. So let's begin with the description first. Now, if you have not watched anything else related to Blood and Ash or Jennifer L. Armentrout, I will link the Blood and Ash, and if you're interested, the Jennifer L. Armentrout playlist. I'll link them both below because I think they're both important. So here is the description though. From the Desperation of Golden Crowns. Castile Denier knows all too well that very few are as cunning or vicious as the Blood Queen, but no one, not even him, could have prepared for the staggering revelations. The magnitude of what the Blood Queen has done is almost unthinkable. And born of mortal flesh, nothing will stop Poppy from freeing her king and destroying everything the Blood Crown stands for. With the strength of the primal of life's guards behind her and the support of the Woven, Poppy must convince the Atlantean generals to make war her way, because there can be no retreat this time. Not if she has any hope of building a future where both kingdoms can reside in peace. A great primal power rises. Together, Poppy and Castile must embrace traditions, old and new, to safeguard those they hold dear and to protect those who cannot defend themselves. But war is only the beginning. Ancient primal powers have already stirred, revealing the horror of what began eons ago. To end what the Blood Queen has begun, Poppy might have to become what she has been prophesied to be, what she fears the most, as the harbinger of death and destruction. I actually remember that I think sometime after I finished, or right when I finished, for my Goodreads review, I wrote, "I love it. I need the next book, please." Because it ended in a way that I was just like, but the next book, where's the next book? I need the next book. It ended in such a way because I was like, it's because by the time I got there was something I really wanted to see, and I was like, because there's something there. I'm gonna spoil it in a little bit, but you know what? I'm gonna start spoiling now. In a minute, but it was great. So one of my favorite things about this book is definitely the dual point of views. I do have a bit of a gripe here, actually two gripes here, and that is that there should have been more Castile. I originally predicted that this book was going to be in Castile and Poppy's point of view when I did the second Blind Woman Anticipates on this book, because the first paragraph mentions Castile, and I was like, okay. So I was like, okay, it's gonna have Castile, especially because I actually predicted it before, but the description kind of gave me an idea, because I'm like, okay, they're both separated. I understand that if they're together, that maybe Poppy would be the one in point of view and Castile may not be, even though they really should have had both. I really wanted them to have both in A Kingdom of Flesh and Fire, but that didn't happen. But they should definitely have more in now that they're separated. It was going to be more. There's definitely going to be there's a possibility of having Castile's point of view. And then we only got as a description, war is only the beginning. And I remember making something out of that and talking about my descriptions. I'm sorry, my predictions. And then we got the second part, the full description, months before, 2 months or so before the book came out. And I was like, okay, we're gonna have Castillo's point of view, I talked about that a little bit and my predictions to that as well. And also a couple of things that I think that came up. One thing I want to say, by the way, is that you should read, before you read The War of Two Queens, you should read A Shadow in the Ember. A Shadow in the Ember is part of her Flesh and Fire series, which is a prequel to Blood and Ash. So you should definitely read A Shadow in the Ember, and because it's a prequel, and because some of the stuff that comes up in A Shadow in the Ember come up in The War of Two Queens. So I definitely suggest that you read it. A gripe that I have with the fact that with Castillo's point of view is, although I loved it, I think there should have been more of Castillo's point of view. There should have been more of his chapters. And another thing too is that, okay, I read this with like the audiobook, okay? And Stina Nielsen is an amazing narrator. I just want to say that she's an amazing narrator. I really like her as a narrator. But for some reason, the guy that narrates Castillo, I think his name is Tim Campbell, he didn't feel like Castillo. I don't know. Maybe he just didn't feel like the voice I imagined for Castillo, but he just totally did not feel like Castillo. I don't know how else to explain that. He didn't feel like Castillo, and I was just like, Castillo. I love Castillo, and I love his point of view, but this narrator doesn't feel like Cass. And I was like, I liked his voice, but he just didn't feel like Castillo at all. I don't know. Maybe that's just me. If someone else heard the War of Two Queens audiobook, let me know what you think about Castillo's narrator. I need someone to know to tell me how they felt about it. But like, someone tell me how they felt, because I was just like, I didn't quite like the narrator. But okay, we found out a couple of interesting things. Spoilers begin now, by the way. First of all, Poppy has a sister who is a revenant, and it turns out to be the same girl that at the end of the Crown of Gilded Bones just like stopped her from basically killing innocent people before she went to Atlantia and confronted Iluana about all the lies that she told, and without not letting them know that Queen Ileana is actually Isbeth. And she's not an Ascended, or she was never the first vampire. So before Poppy went to confront her, she was basically about to demolish a city or village or something on her own anger. But this revenant stopped her. We find out that same revenant. Bleh. By the way, revenants also come up in A Shadow in the Ember. So anyway, we find out that this revenant is actually Poppy's sister. Her originally the first daughter of Isbeth, and I was like, what? We find out a little bit more on Isbeth too. We like dive into her character, and we understand, like, we know why she does what she does. I mean, it's not excused. Like, we can't excuse what she does, and even Poppy does not excuse what she does, but we can understand what she does, if you know what I mean. Like, you can understand why she took the actions she took, but you don't excuse them. And it was really interesting to delve into Isbeth's character and know why she's doing what she's doing. And even if it's in a really weird, twisted way, she actually loves her daughters. It's twisted, but she loves them. Her name is, the Revenant's name is Millie, or Millicent, but they just call her Millie. Turns out she did not survive the culling. Like she was not a primal. Like she ended up not being a primal. And in order to save her, she used, Isbeth basically made her into a revenant. And also, it turns out Poppy was afraid of Coralina's eyes for some reason. And she basically lent her magic so that and that's why Poppy believed that Coralina's eyes are brown, because Isbeth gave her magic in order, I guess, to change the eye color, because Poppy was afraid of them. So in her own weird way, Isbeth loved her children, or her daughters in general. She just was really heavily corrupted and everything. And honestly, it was interesting. It was interesting to see. I like to see I enjoyed the relationship between Kieran and Poppy. It was really interesting because they basically Kieran has taken to sleeping with Poppy in his woven form because she's not sleeping after Castile. It's really interesting because she finds out that they're heartmates too, and that they and they can communicate in like these like dreams and everything. And we find out that basically the priests and priestesses are also serving who they call the true king. And she's like, and at first people think it's Niktos, and they're like, the true king. And it's like, Jalara's dead. Like, what are they talking about? Or then they think it's like, actually, no, they didn't even mention Jalara. They were like, they're thinking it's probably Malek. Because it turns out he and Isbeth are heartmates, and they're like, they probably talk about Malek, right? That's like what their first thing is, and it turns out to be very different, but I'm going to talk about that in a little bit. But anyway, yeah, Kieran has taken to doing that, and it's really sweet in a way, and it's also kind of adorable because Poppy is basically counting the days that Castile's not there. You get a day count, even though she's focusing on conquering specific cities and taking them under Atlantea's banners and convincing mortals that we're not gonna hurt you and everything. And all the predictions we had, by the way, that I had about the Rite were kind of correct, that like basically somehow they found out about the Rite that was originally done when the gods still were able to go into the mortal world. And they somehow, imitated them. It turns out that Malek pretty much told her all about the things that were done, the ways that things were in the past. And Isbeth is not doing that, and that is why the rites happen the way that they do. And it turns out supposedly that they are now serving the true king, which we find out later is actually Colas, who was originally, I believe he was originally the king of gods, because he was in A Shadow in the Ember. We find out that Colas is Niktos' uncle, and Ethos' brother, and Ethos was originally the primal of life, but Colas fell in love with a woman he saw picking flowers, or supposedly fell in love with her. Her name was Zutoria, and then because he was watching her or whatever, and she ended up running and falling off the cliffs of sorrow. Turns out Poppy knew the story because Ian did, and it turns out Victor was a Victor. Like, he was the guy that kind of like watched over her, because Victors watch people who are meant to do important things in life. And turns out Poppy, of course, was one of those people, and Victor was watching over her, and he didn't know that, and he found out later about that. It's a very interesting thing. And he, so we find that out through Tawny, because Tawny also went through a change after the Bloodstone, I guess, entered her blood or whatever. Like, she was knocked out for a while. So we don't know who she is, but I have a weird prediction on this. Or like, I'm sorry, we don't know what happened to her, but I have like a weird prediction of this. And it's an outlandish theory that can outright not be proven. But I don't know. It's like a weird theory I have no evidence for, but it would be like the outlandish thing that could happen, and I would be like, wait, really? Are we sure? Like, if that happens, it would be like the most outlandish part of the book, and I would be like, okay. interesting. I'm in for the ride, you know what I mean? I'm totally in for the ride. But basically, wait, where was? Oh, okay. So Zutoria fell off the Cliffs of Sorrow, and we find out that Seraphina is the reincarnation of Zutoria. But basically, what ended up happening is that Colas asked his brother to bring back Zutoria, and he said no. I mean, originally there were some issues with Ethos and Colas, where Ethos was respected while as the primal of life, while Colas was more feared as the primal of death. And basically, so there was some resentment, but when Colas wouldn't bring her back to life, you know, Ethos had rules about when he brought people to life, or how that works, you know, like he had some rules, and he didn't bring, and Zutoria was already kind of at peace, right? And so Colas ended up found a way to take away the to switch like essences, and he ended up becoming the primal of life, while Ethos became the primal of death. But the thing is that not everything was, you know, they still had the essence of who they used to be. So there was still a, like, say, like an ember, or part of the, you know, of the primal of life in Ethos, as he used to be the primal of life, and there's also a part of Colas and the primal of death. So there's still some essence on that, and everything. So and then of course when Nyctos was born, he took the ember of life and put it in the Mirel bloodline, which was then born into Seraphina, and she and yeah. So we find out in the book, and we also find out in Shadow on the Ember as well, that you know, Nyctos didn't understand why he wanted a mortal consort, right? Nobody knew why he wanted a mortal consort, but he made the deal. Like, that was the deal, to give life to, you know, to the land, and he'll have to Lasagna, and make, you know, have a you know, he'll have the first female that was born was going to be his mortal consort. And then, you know, Seraphina was trained to kill the primal of death in order to benefit them. But then we find out that that's not why the rot is taking over Lasagna. We find out that she basically it's because two primals of death are technically ruling. And then we find out everything. It was really interesting because at that time, you know, everyone believed that Nyctos was primal of life and death, but we find out at the end that no, the consort's name, sorry, I couldn't talk. The consort's name was not known through history. Nobody knew her name, but it's because she is extremely powerful. Like, Reaver said that calling out her name would be to like it would lead to a lot of power, and that apparently, you know, Poppy apparently knew her name because she told her that after, because we also find out what happened the night that Poppy was bitten and that Leopold basically was killed, as well as Coralina. Like, she thought her parents died. Like, we found out that story in Lockswood. So we find out the full memory, and one of the things that ended up happening is that Seraphina did communicate with her and tell her you know, her name, and we find out that, you know, that history was kind of manipulated by the end in order for them to find out about Seraphina. And at first, Poppy's like, why? Like, we're like, Nyctos this and everything, when it should have been Seraphina this and Seraphina that. Like, it sounds like sexist bullshit. And I was like, yes, it does. But it turns out that, you know, Nyctos wouldn't have deprived her of credit. And of course he wouldn't have. Like, I read the first book, he wouldn't have. But he did it because that is what Seraphina wanted. He took the credit in order for them not to find out about it, because it turns out, you know, Seraphina is the primal of life, and which we find out at the end of Shadow and the Ember, and also Queen of the Gods, which is why she's extremely powerful. I loved it so much. Another thing is I like Reaver as an adult. His sarcasm, amazing. As a kid, there was a scene in A Shadow in the Ember where he was so intense and just have like he was like his conversation as a kid felt like he was kind of like an adult, and I was like, what the heck, what's happening? I thought he was a 10-year-old kid. And I remember Sarah being, that was, and then Nick was like, intense, and she's like, yeah. And I'm like, yeah, okay, you're right. I mean, in The Shadow and the Ember, we also meet Jadis, which we don't get to see in this book. But one of the things that came up here is Nektas appears at the end when like everything felt like it was lost. Like there was like everyone basically died at the end. Pretty much everyone basically died. And then in order to end certain things, Poppy did end up saying Seraphina's name, and everybody, we find out that after everything that happened, all the gods basically woke up, and not everybody is loyal to the primal of life. But Poppy is also a primal, and she is the primal of life and death. But she's also not as powerful as the consort yet. And that any females, any women that are basically born, if they choose to have them, her offspring would basically be primal now. But it was supposed to be born first in the female bloodline. But any children that they have now will basically be primals now. And that all the gods are awake, but not all the gods are loyal to the primal of life. And it's really interesting in that end. And one of the things that ended up with the Crown of Gilded Bones is that, she awakened the guard, the Draken, and Nektas asked her if she'll get what the consort needs to wake up, which is to get back her father Iris. And turns out, she finds out exactly who that is. It turns out it was the cave cat she saw as a kid. And he and she's like, okay, yeah, I think I know where he is. And he mentioned his daughter, and she's like, and he's like, what's your daughter's name? And he's like, Jadis. So we learn about Jadis, like that she left with Iris. And by the end of it, Poppy's like, I'm sorry, like, we think that Jadis might be dead. And Reaver's like, Jadis is probably dead because of everything that they learned, that Jadis is probably dead. And Nektas is like, no, Jadis is still alive. I can, like, Reaver may not be able to, but I sense her. It's very different. Like, I sense her in the realm. Jadis is still alive. So at the end, the book kind of ends with them going to find Iris and Jadis so that he can return, so that Nektas can then return to Elysian. And so here's where my weird outlandish theory comes in. So Tawny does act strange now. And Poppy can't feel emotions, but she's also not in Ascended. And if I remember correctly, I don't think she can sense emotions from the Draken either. So it makes me wonder, what if Tawny is Jadis? Like, what if Isbeth somehow managed to do something? What happens if that's the case? I have no proof for this. It was like the first thing I thought about was like, what happens if Tawny is Jadis? Like, what would happen with that? What would it be like? Why would it work out? Like, I don't know. It was just something I thought about for some reason. We also get to dive into Malik's character, by the way. And he was interesting because it turns out that he says that Millie is his heartmate. So there are a lot of things that he did for her, which I thought were extremely interesting. Millie as a character is also really awesome. Really great. She had she had an interesting character arc as well. Like she also had no choice, like Poppy and everything. Isbeth's end was amazing. I like Poppy with all that power. I loved it. I will say the one thing that I was surprised about, I was kind of hyped up for, was definitely the joining. So it turns out Kieran, Poppy, and Castile and Kieran basically took part of the joining, and they joined their lives to hers. And it was really interesting because I was expecting, I'll be honest, I was expecting a threesome, and it kind of happened, but not really. So it was I don't know what else I was expecting, for the joining. I don't know how to feel about it. And there was a lot, there was like a lot of sex in the book, especially after Castillo came back, but I was okay with it. I was genuinely okay with it. It was very interesting. I did enjoy the War of Two Queens. I enjoyed at the end, especially because Poppy was going through the culling, and eventually she became primal, and it was great. It was really interesting. Turns out she got fangs like Matos. It was great. It turns out Serafina was going through, like, she was getting, like, there was blood every time she brushed her teeth, or once in a while, and she was getting these headaches. And with Poppy, we find out that she's getting fangs. And it seems, I'm predicting that in A Light in the Flame, that Poppy is going to go through the culling. Not Poppy, I'm sorry. Serafina is going to go through the culling, and that, she's going to get fangs. Of course, I feel like she genuinely is. And I feel like she's going to go through the culling in A Light in the Flame. So I am super excited for, because I'm recording this, guys, you're seeing this. It's November when you're seeing this. I'm recording this, and it's March. Okay, it's March of 2022, and I'm recording this. It's the end of March 2022, and I'm recording this, and I'm like, okay, I have some predictions. Like, I know the title for the next book, but I don't have a description for the next book. And I'm just like, I need a description for. I need like a description for Light in the Flame. I need the next title for the next Blood and Ash book, because there are 2 more books in the series. There's so much I want right now as I'm recording this, so much. So those are my thoughts, my very rambly thoughts on the War of Two Queens. Let me know your thoughts. I'm so excited. Everything is awesome. Yay! So next week is going to be a bit of a change of pace, because I am going to review another book, but it's not a good review. I'm giving you a heads up. It's not a good review. I'll be reviewing The Duke and I by Julia Quinn. All right. Anyway, subscribe if you're interested in my content. Comment down below anything you like, and I will see you next week with another video. Until then, consume stories. Bye.